Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different than usual. Today we're going to be having a look at a Chinese 040 steam locomotive I found on eBay. I stumbled across this thing a couple months ago when I was just browsing around, but I was kind of surprised because the seller is Eve Models or Ever Models. I'm not sure which way the name goes, but either way, they've generally just been a manufacturer of sort of budget rolling stock and things like that. I haven't seen them release any locomotives, at least up until now. Now, the thing that really shocked me about this engine is that it is a dead ringer for an 040 that Model Power used to produce. Model Power was a American manufacturer that was making locomotives, I think, for like 50 years or something. They're still kind of a household name despite being out of the business for about 10 years or so. So I'm guessing that one of three things happened. Either they bought the tooling and have started producing these things again. Maybe they cloned the tooling and are just making knockoffs of what Model Power was making years ago. Or third, maybe they're just reselling new old stock that Model Power failed to sell before they went out of business. I really don't know. But either way, I just thought that this would be an interesting thing to have a look at and kind of compare to what Model Power was doing all those years ago. Now, something I found interesting is that if you look at this Walters catalog from 2008, you can find what cosmetically appears to be the exact same locomotive as what's in this box. You can see they have a whole bunch of different liveries. And your $2008 could buy you this locomotive for about 34 American dollars. Now, they wanted $45 for this locomotive, so they basically just kept pace with inflation. Whether or not it's actually worth that kind of money, I don't really know. We'll have to find out for ourselves, but I just thought that that was a bit of an interesting detail. The description for this model is quite hilarious too. There's quite a few things which I'm not so sure are truthful. It claims to have been made this year. I don't know. Maybe that's possible. It could be old tooling being reused. It claims to be painted. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I think parts of it might be painted, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it's just injected plastic with the right color. It claims to be Amtrak. I don't think that's true. Based on the pictures, it looked to have its own special livery, but we'll have to see about that. The rest of this stuff appears to be correct, but one thing that I thought was quite funny is that it says you should be 17 years or older to operate this locomotive. And then down here it says you should be 15 years and above to operate it. And then right here it says it's a great gift for children. So I guess you have to be a 15 or 17-year-old child to operate this thing. And it's good for educationality, uniqueness, and promotion of creativity. Let's get it out of the box and see if that's really true. I'm happy to see it is in an EV model box and not a Model Power box. I wasn't really sure what to expect there. Let's have a look, see what we're dealing with. I do like the box. It doesn't seem to have anything specific to the locomotive, but it is very clean looking. I'll give them credit for that. Huh, it's a pretty nice looking box, and well, right there in the middle is in fact the locomotive. Just as I suspected, it is not a Amtrak engine. Railway train, that's a little bit of a weird badge. They do have some colored details here and there, which is nice to see. I really do think that this is the same tooling that Model Power was using all those years ago, but I wonder if they came up with their own logos, maybe just to make it look a little bit more modern. Here is an actual Model Power locomotive, and I mean, if you look at the bottom here, they pretty much look identical. It seems like they might be using a bit of a different nylon for this, but yeah, everything else, the contacts, the wiring, all seem pretty much the same. Here's something different. We do appear to have a tail light, although it's red, which I don't think they ever used on dockside locomotives like this. Got a nice little headlight right there. Actual coupler on the back. It looks very similar to a Bachmann one. I don't know if it's genuine or a knockoff. And then we've just got a cosmetic coupler on the front, which I don't think will be of very much use. Anyways, let's take this thing over to the track. We'll see how it performs, and then after that, we'll kind of tear it apart and see what the internals are looking like. I think they're going to be identical to this thing, but we can compare them and see if they actually have made any more changes on the inside here. Okay, first run here on the layout. Let's give it some voltage, and it does start right up. That's good to see. Well, it's not lacking in terms of top end speed. We'll have to check in on the low speed, but first I want to see what the pulling capacity for this locomotive is like. So for this test, I've just got a whole bunch of different freight cars all set up, and we'll just keep adding them on and just see kind of where it starts to struggle to pull them along. I'm not expecting anything too remarkable since this is a four-wheel locomotive, but we'll see where it is. I've tried to make sure these are all a pretty average weight just so that the test is fair, and we'll just run it back and forth and kind of see where it starts to kick out. So we'll begin with just 2 cars, see if it can do that. No problem, let's try 3. Seems pretty good. Let's go for 4. It seems to be starting to slip, but we'll add a 5th car on. So it's definitely starting to struggle with 6 cars. The 7th might just do it in, but we'll see. It's getting pretty close to what I have left in terms of freight cars here. Well, it's really struggling with 7, but let's throw an 8th on there. Well, it's not very happy, but it is capable of handling 8 cars, apparently. So it is still technically moving even with 9 cars, but it's really struggling, so realistically I think this thing can really only pull about 7, maybe 8 cars if they're light. It's not horrible for what it is. Even in the real world, these things would not have been hauling a whole lot in terms of cargo. You know, they just would have been shunting stuff around a yard or bringing things to a factory. So I think that that's acceptable for what it is. Now let's bring it over to the workbench and see if we can figure out why it's making that thumping noise, because I think that something might have been manufactured incorrectly. So to me it sounds like a couple of moving parts are making contact with each other, and this is just one of the joys of working with steam locomotives, which is that you have a lot of different things which can interfere with each other. I already have my suspect, which is that this is, you know, quite close together and it's a lot further apart on that side. But let's give it a chance here. We're gonna give it some power and just see if we can try to identify what exactly is going on with this engine. So I don't know if it actually is making contact with this or if the axle is pre-bent from the factory, because that does seem to be wobbling around quite a bit while this thing runs. So that very well could be the issue. But either way, let's take it apart and just kind of see what the internals are looking like. I'm also going to disassemble this very similar locomotive and see if there are actually any differences. And, well, yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. Just got a light, which has kind of been yoked right to the weight right here. They have done a bit of wire management with some electrical tape, but that's basically it. And then up here, we've got an LED light. It appears with a resistor that's just been universal motor mounted to the body itself. Kind of looks like it was made in my workshop, actually, but we'll have a closer look at this thing and see if there are any differences. And, well, kind of looks like there hardly are any major changes other than, you know, the wiring is a little bit thicker in the newer model, and I think they're using a slightly more modern motor, so I do believe that this is not old stock. I think that they genuinely are manufacturing these things once again. The older model doesn't have the LED on the back, too, so that does appear to be a somewhat new feature. I think Model Power might have been including these on their steam locomotives by the end as well, but still, at least they added something on there. Here's something new. Look at that, they're actually putting a brass worm gear on this one, and the old model is nylon. Now, I'm a larger fan of brass parts over nylon parts because nylon parts have a tendency to crack and brass ones don't. The only place where I could see there being a problem is when you've got brass on nylon. The brass is obviously a lot more abrasive and can actually wear down the nylon, whereas when you've got nylon on nylon parts, they tend to run a little bit quieter and last a lot longer. So whether or not this is actually a good thing overall, I don't really know. If it was brass on brass, I'd say, you know, just keep it well lubricated and it should be fine, but that actually could be a point of failure because I have seen that on some older lifelike engines. Now, as for why it sounds like it's knocking louder than a car extended warranty salesman, we're going to try to find that out. And there's definitely a lot of messiness right here. You can see the paint is chipping away from the chassis. It does appear to have metal axles as well, which is a nice feature, and they're splined, which should help prevent this gear from spinning around there. So, you know, at least there was some effort in terms of trying to make this somewhat reliable in the long run. I don't know if it's really going to work out that way, but I'll give credit where credit is due. Now, as for why the drive is making so many funny noises, I think it might unfortunately have to do with just how much play is in these wheel sets. If we look at the older Model Power one, which probably dates back to the 90s, you see these are a lot tighter, so without that extra play, I think everything is just quartered a little bit better, and that ticking is because of that. Not a great thing, because as this model ages, that is only going to get worse. It'd be really nice if they put some actual bushings in here, but I think that maybe that's a bit of a high expectation for a locomotive in this price point. Although this one that's probably about 30 years old hasn't suffered the same fate. For anybody out there wondering whether or not this is up to standards, those are engage, those are also engage. Oh, wouldn't you know it, the coupler height is correct as well. So even though this thing might not have the finest craftsmanship out there, it is somewhat MNRA compliant, which is impressive. Now for a final test, let's see what the locomotive's low speed is like. I'm just going to really slowly bring up the power here until it starts to move at whatever speed it can do at the lowest point. Already got it up to about a half volt, and I can hear the motor humming a bit. Let's bring it up to 1 volt here. And I just saw it move ever so slightly, and just over 1 volt seems to be enough to get it moving here. And honestly, that's not that bad for a locomotive with a 3-pole motor. I really wouldn't expect anything too remarkable like train show speeds out of it, but I think that that is perfectly acceptable. Let's test it out in the other direction here and see if the results are any different. And yeah, it's the exact same thing at about, you know, maybe 1.5 volts. It seems to be able to move no lower than that. Really not too bad. Well, folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. At the end of the day, I'm feeling very mixed about this locomotive. On one hand, the craftsmanship and the performance are really nothing all that impressive. They're really what you would expect for a locomotive of this sort, and I wouldn't have a problem with that other than the fact they're trying to sell it for $45. I really don't feel that's a very good value for your money. For another like $20, you could buy yourself a Walters Trainline diesel, which in my opinion is a way better engine than something like this. Having said that, I am quite psyched to see a junky brand apparently resurrected again, and if some company out of China or anywhere else wants to, you know, go around buying the tooling from all these old brands that are defunct now, like Lifelike and Tyco and Model Power, and making these things again, I'm all for that. All I would love to see is these things being sold at a slightly better price, because I personally think an engine like this is probably worth closer to like maybe $20 or $30. I think even in 2008, Model Power was charging too much for them, so with inflation, even though it's about the equivalent to $30 of your 2008 money, I just don't feel like it's the best value. Having said that, if Eve Models does have the tooling for this stuff, what I would love to see are these little train sets that they used to make, which featured basically this exact locomotive or a diesel, a couple cars, a caboose, a loop, a track, and a controller, because those things were dirt cheap. They were selling them for like $50 for a complete train set, which I think is very impressive, and I think they were very important in the hobby, you know, for a lot of people who want to get into model railroading, but maybe don't have the funds to do so. So if they can bring that stuff back and sell it at a fair price, I am 100% for that. I'd really love to see that. This is not going to be the last review of an Eve model product, though, because I also noticed that after I ordered this, they actually came out with a couple of electric locomotives, or maybe they're diesel electrics, I can't remember which, but they appeared to use the tooling from Juef, so it does look like they are kind of going around and buying old tooling. So I am very excited to see where this leads. Maybe we'll have a resurgence of junky locomotives once again. If that's the case, I will be a very happy camper if they can sell it for the good price. Anyways, please share your thoughts on this thing in the comments. I'm really curious to see what all of you have to say about it. But until then, I just want to thank you all so much for watching.